Right, so today we're talking about chapter 19 and chapter 20. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the terminal first, and then we'll get to the HTML. So you already know the basics of getting around the terminal just for being able to, do a couple things like, making your Git commits and moving around directories so you could run a JavaScript program, things like that. I'm going to revisit this kind of bigger picture of why, we use the CLI so much in development, and then go into some commands, and I'll teach you some new ones that you may not already know. So if this slide looks familiar, it's because I went over it on day one. Now that you guys are using this from the beginning in Unit 1, but let's just go through it. So there are a lot of things that are just easier to install, run, manage, etc. from the command line interface. And you already know how to use NPM to install dependencies. There are other things out there, managers like Homebrew and Yarn. You can manage version control, which is Git. That is what we primarily use, and you're doing a whole lot of that already. And then we can run JavaScript files. You know how to do that as well with the node command. When we get to the end of this unit, you will be creating and running React applications from the command line. And then, of course, there is just a whole lot more that can be done as well. So let's talk about some of the most common commands that you are likely to use. And I'm going to demonstrate a few of these for you. PWD, I think I've shown this to you before, but that means present working directory, just to find out what is the path of the place that I'm currently at. And ls, of course, lists the contents of the directory you're in. CD changes directory. If you use CD and then ... combined with slashes, that will take you backwards. As many directories as you need to go back, you can do the ... CD alone will take you all the way back to the root in case you just need to start at the beginning and go somewhere else. mkdir creates a new directory. Touch will create a new file. And you can actually also use things like nano to both create and edit a file. Cat will display the contents of a file right there in the terminal. And you can make a copy of a file with CP and name the file that you want to copy, and then name what the new file and location should be. And you can use MV to do two things. You can use it to rename an existing file in place, or you can just move that same file to a new location. RM is what you would use to delete files. You just want to be really careful with it because once it's gone, it's gone. And then there are a bunch of shortcuts to use. Control C clears the prompt of anything you started to type. It'll also clear things if you are running, like when we get to React and you're running your React application, if you want to stop it, you just Control C. It gets you back to the prompt. Tab will autocomplete directory names or file names. Hopefully you're already making use of that a little bit. Up and down arrows will cycle through previous commands at the prompt. And I mentioned this before, if you have more content than will fit on the screen at one time, you'll see that colon. Anytime you see that, you can use the space bar to kind of page through all the information, but if you just want to get back to your prompt, just use Q. So that's a reminder on that. So let me do a number of demonstrations here, and I'm going to use my regular old terminal here to do this. So I can check where I currently am and see that I'm just at /user/crj, which is on my computer is my root directory. So I'm going to CD coding, LaunchCode, and lecture examples. And I could take a look here and see that I've got 3 directories: JavaScript, C#, and Java. And so from here, I can go into Unit 1 JavaScript, and I want to go to my repo that I use for my examples, JavaScript lecture examples. So now I'm inside my repository, and notice because of the way that I've customized my prompt, it's also showing me, hey, you're inside a Git directory now. That's a helpful thing. You should, if you get to the point where you've got a little time to look into this, you could look into how to customize your prompt and learn things like that. I can't teach you how to do it directly because it's different on every system and depending on what shell you're using, but you can look into it for your system. If we use present working directory again, you can see now the full path of everything I just navigated through, right? And that tells me this is where I am now. So let's go ahead and go into the chapter 19 directory, which currently has absolutely nothing. I do ls and there's nothing there, right? So I can create a new file. I could create a file called hello.txt. And now if I ls, I can see it, right? Let's say I want to edit it right here in the terminal. I can use Nano. That's my personal editor of choice. Okay. And I go into this editor and it's giving me a blank screen, but there's all this stuff down here at the bottom where you can see, the kind of, it tells you what to do. Like if you want to exit, if you want to write out, which is save, if you want to cut or uncut text, which is, cut and paste, those kinds of things. So I will just go ahead and put a little bit of text in here. I'll just say, hello there. And then I can either go ahead and save with Control O, or I can Control X to exit, and then it will say, hey, you've got some unsaved changes. Do you want to save them? And I'll say yes. And then I'll hit enter to save the file. And now if I want to see the contents of that file from here, I can just use the cat command and say cat.hello.txt, and there it is. Hello there. Okay, let's create a new file, and this time I'm going to just use Nano and give it a name. I'm going to call it springflowers.txt. And this is going to create it and let me edit it at the same time. So now we have a file, and I can say, spring flowers, and I'll just put in a few of my favorites. Crocuses. Number 2 will be daffodils. Tulips, of course, and peonies. Okay. And I will Control X and say yes to save, hit enter, and now I'm back to my prompt. So I can cat this file, springflowers.txt, and I see the contents. Okay. Let's say that I've decided I want my files to now be stored in a directory. I can make a directory with mkdir, and I'll just call it files. We're going to be really generic. But now that I've done that, if I do ls, you can see I've got files, I've got hello.txt, and I've got springflowers text, all 3 things I just created. So let's say I decide I don't really need to keep hello.txt. That was just a one-time thing. I'm going to remove it, rm hello.txt. And it doesn't really give you any sort of confirmation when you do these things, but I can verify it with ls to list the contents again. And now I see I only have the files directory and springflowers.txt. Okay, so now I want to move this file into that directory. I can just use mv for move, say springflowers.txt, and then I'm going to go to the files location and give it the same name. But that tells it where I want to move it to. Now, if I ls, I only see files. So let's cd into files. And then I ls again, and we can see springflowers.txt. So it has been moved. What if I want a second file, but I'd like to base it on the first file? I can use cp to copy and just say I want to copy springflowers.txt, and the new file should be named summerflowers.txt. Okay, so now we have 2 files, springflowers.txt, summerflowers.txt. I can nano summerflowers.txt, so I can go in and edit it, and we'll see the contents of springflowers, of course. So I can come here and do a little editing, say summerflowers, And then let's say here, I'm going to use Control K to cut all these, and I'll start over. So I'll just list and say, let's do roses and marigolds and geraniums. And then I will exit and save. And I can cat summer flowers. And there it is, summer flowers, roses, marigolds, and geraniums. Okay, so these are some basics. Depending on what type of development work you do, you may or may not spend a lot of time in the terminal. If you do, there are going to be lots more things for you to learn, and this is going to be just the very beginning foundation. If you don't, then you probably will learn a little bit more, but you'll still be focused on a lot of the things you're already doing. So it's just going to depend on what type of development you're doing. But my advice to you is either way, if this feels like a big black hole of scary nothingness that, you get in here and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm afraid that I'm going to break something, keep pushing past that, get to the point where you don't really feel the pressure of that learning curve anymore, and just get comfortable with whatever it is you need to do. Go out there, there's resources out there to learn more and get a little more comfortable. And then this is going to become just a matter of course, and you will, continue focusing on the things you're actually building, and maybe focus a little less on exactly what command to use for what, just to get things done when you need to get things done in the CLI. I still use the CLI for quite a lot, even though I'm a front-end developer. It really is just part of the package. I'm using it all the time. Okay. Anybody got any questions about any of that?
Did you have one time? Okay. No, I think we are good.
Okay, then let's go ahead and get started on HTML. I say this is the cornerstone of web development because literally the entire web is built on HTML. So you're learning the building blocks today, and that will enable you to kind of go from there and learn other aspects of creating web pages. So what is HTML? We'll talk about that, and then start showing you some syntax and terminology. And I'm going to talk about structuring your content, and then how do you view it in the browser. And then we're going to look at some common tags. I'm going to go through a bunch of different elements and teach you different tags. And then I'll show you the browser developer tools and how you can use that to view the different parts of your page right there in the browser and interact with it a little bit. Okay. So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. All web pages are structured with HTML, even if they're built with a framework or a library like Angular or React. They ultimately are compiled into HTML that the browser can read and render. So HTML allows you to organize your content. That's really the primary use of it. It's not so much for styling. We're going to get to that when we learn about CSS. It also does inform layout to a certain extent in terms of the structuring and making sure you've got things grouped together the way that you want them. But typically CSS is used for like saying exactly where on the page it should go and making sure things can be side by side or things like that. All HTML files should have the extension html.html. And the home page is always going to be index.html at the root level, but then any additional ones, if you just had a directory and you wanted to make a home page for that directory, you would call that index.html as well. A URL is the full address of a website, but you don't usually see the file name on the home page. So this is how it ends up looking, right? If you have mywebsite.com, that's the same thing as saying mywebsite.com/index.html. So that's what I say when I mean it's essentially the homepage for that location. Okay. Talk about some of the syntax and terminology. I'm going to use these words a lot, so I wanted to make sure you're clear on what they are before I move forward and just start saying them all the time. So elements, tags, and attributes, what are these? What are the differences? An element is a section of content defined within HTML. And then you use pairs of tags to define that element. And an opening tag looks like this, where you have the less than and greater than signs with the name of the tag there. And then the corresponding closing tag has a slash in it, like this, slash tag. Tag is not a tag. I'm just showing you the, the syntax. Then there's an attribute where you have something inside that tag that provides additional information. All HTML files have to have an HTML element that encloses the head and body elements. That's the main structure of the page. So you may see something that looks like this as the default kind of bare bones structure of your page. You might see this doc type HTML thing at the top. But you'll definitely have HTML opening and closing here and here. And you might have something like this where it sets the language to English. That's an attribute. That lang is an attribute. Then you typically are going to have the head and the body. That is, those are both kind of required. The head is where all of the things go that are like behind the scenes things that the browser needs to know about, things that will help a search engine find that page. And then this little title right here, I don't think I really say this anywhere, but I'm gonna do it in a minute for you. But I also just wanted to point out, when you have a title like this, a title tag in the head, again, think behind the scenes, right? This is where you're like going to link to, like later we're going to learn how to link to a style shade and link to a JavaScript file. All of that would go here. The title is actually what shows up on the tag. Excuse me, the tab, this tab up here in the browser. So whatever you put here in the title that's in the head, that's where you're going to see it is up on the tab. The body is where the content of all the page goes. But let me just point these out again. Okay, so opening and closing tags are all the ones in red. Attributes are in orange. And if an attribute has a value, which most of them do, you'll see it in you see it in green here, and you'll often see it in quotes. So the body is where all of your primary content goes that's actually to be viewed on the page. And so you can section out the body a bit with things like a header, which is for kind of the bar across the top. Most people use that. They'll often put a nav menu up in the top. That's another tag you might see. And then there's footer, which is usually used for that bar across the bottom. You often see, big companies especially will have a ton of fine print down there, tiny little links to their legal department or, how to find out, how to contact them and, maybe apply for a job. They usually stick that kind of stuff in the footer. And then main is everything else between header and footer. If you don't want it in the header footer, put it in main. So we could section it out like this. Now, when we get to the body, you may have noticed on the previous page, head and body weren't indented inside HTML. That's really the exception, and it's kind of the way that most things get formatted automatically, even if you try for them not to be. This is going to be the last time that you see something where it's not indented, even though it's nested inside that HTML. Everything else should be nested and indented. So header, main, footer, you see that those are all indented slightly from body. And that helps you visually see that it's nested inside. You absolutely need to pay attention to this because the more complex these pages get and full of information, the harder it is to read them if they're not indented. So again, the entire body holds the content that you want to see on the page. You have a header, a main, and a footer. Typically, you're just going to want to structure things this way as a matter of course. Okay, so if you want to divide your content into sections, you can do that. There are actual tags for this. The section tag is good for encapsulating related content. So if you want to group a bunch of content together that has some, all should be part of the same section, put it in a section tag. There's an article tag that is similar, but the main distinction between section and article is that if you put something inside an article page, everything inside inside an article tag, everything inside of that should be able to stand on its own. So you could think of something like, sometimes somebody might pull content like an article from someone else's website and just display it on their page. If the article tag is used, it's very easy for them to go find what they're looking for and just grab all of it and put it where they want to display it. News sites do this all the time with each other's articles, right? So that would be an example of that. And that might be why you'd want to use article. You are going to be required to use article for your graded assignment 4, hint, hint. So that's why I'm talking about it. Div is something you'll see all the time. It's primarily used just for styling and layout purposes when you need to separate something and say, I want to be able to control where all this goes in a certain way. I want relative to another section of information. And so div is going to be for things like that, but it doesn't really have the same implication of section in terms of having like a whole section of a lot of related things. So it's kind of a smaller scale, a little bit more granular. And so we're going to deal with that a lot when we get to CSS because you'll use divs to wrap it around a bunch of things that you want to be styled a certain way. HR is something that you don't see very often anymore, but back in the day when I first learned HTML, which was 1995, this was the only way that you could kind of show a visual break on your page and everything was just from top to bottom. You couldn't really put things next to each other. So HR was a little more popular back then. But that's one that you may see from time to time. Okay. I really am going to live code some of this for you. We're going to do it in just a minute, but I want to talk about one more thing. You can view your page in the browser by just like opening the index.html page in the browser, but there's a better way because you should be testing your page constantly as you code. But there's this thing called Live Server that's an extension in VS Code that actually is helpful because it serves the page to the browser, and as you update things and save them in your file in VS Code, it automatically updates them. You don't have to continuously go back to the browser and refresh over and over again. It'll just refresh it for you. So I really love Live Server. I use it for all my web development stuff, with the exception of like React, something like React. If you're using something like that to serve an application, it has its own built-in server, so you don't have to worry about it. But if you're just doing vanilla JavaScript, if you're just doing regular HTML or you're doing an application with just JavaScript and HTML, Live Server is a great way to go. Okay. So the way you do this is to right-click on your index.html file once you have it installed and just say open with Live Server. There will be an option for you there once you've installed it. And it looks like this. And then it's going to default to serving it on your home little, IP address here, and it'll serve it at port 5500 by default. If you serve two different things at one time, it may do like 5501 or 5502, but the very first time you do it, it's going to default to 5500. Okay, so I'm going to show you what this looks like. We're going to go ahead and put some things in place, some of the tags that I've already mentioned. We're going to build a little website here. And let's see, I'm going to go here. Let's just do this first, and then I'm going to talk about the planning part. Okay. So here you see that I have HTML opening and closing. Notice when I click on this tag that the closing tag highlights. That's a helpful little thing that VS Code does for you, so you can see what's nested inside what while you're in here. I do have head and body indented. I forced it to do that because it didn't automatically do it. But I'm just going to continue indenting from here on out. So there's a number of things I could do. Let's go ahead and add a page title for the browser. And so I'll put title, and I'm going to call it, what am I going to call it? Yes. Okay. So we're creating a blog, a little blog post here. So I'm going to call it The Green Thumb. And I'm going to say the author's name is Ivana Grostuff because I like puns. Okay. And so we have that, and then we could add like a header and a main and a footer. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll create header and I'll do main. Actually, let's do this. I'll do that here. These actually are going to belong up inside here. So I'm going to move them now to where our to-dos are where they're supposed to be relative to these sections. I'll do main, and all of this should go inside main. So I'll move it up. And then here we want a footer. I'll move that inside. Okay, so we have inside our body, the portion that should display on the page. I've got a header, I've got main, and I've got a footer. And we can go from there and start adding some things. But like for right now, inside main, it says add an article with 4 sections. We can do that. And so I'll move these up into here, and then we're going to have some sections. I'll create, I'm going to create 4 of these, I think. Yes, 4 sections. So inside the first section, we're going to, actually the first 2 sections, we're going to have some headings and paragraphs and put some text in here, but I'll talk about that in a minute. For now, let's see, this one refers to the 3rd section, so I'll go up here and put that there. And then in the 4th section, we should have, and actually this one should belong with the 3rd. This one says to add a floating image above the article. So really, if I wanted to, I could move this all the way up here and just put it, even though it's to-do number 9, I'll put it right here with 3 because it actually refers to putting it above the article. Okay, so we've got everything sectioned out kind of where we want it. And already you can see that I've done a lot of planning, right? I have an idea of what it is that I want to be where in terms of the flow of the content. And I also know what I want to talk about. So I created these to-dos based on my planning. And so I want to talk for just a minute about that process. It is generally a good idea to plan ahead and think through everything you're going to need before you actually start coding your page. So I decided, that for this blog for today, I want to report on my activities and talk about, kind of what I got done in my garden today. Then I'm going to have another section that's, kind of detailing my plans for tomorrow, what kind of tasks I'm going to need to accomplish to move my plans forward for my garden. Then I'm going to talk about some of the specific plants I want to plant, some of the bulbs I'm going to plant, and what are some of the things that are required, like their quantity, like whether I should cluster them together or not, how far apart should I space them, how deep should I plant them. I'm going to kind of have some of that information on here for my faithful readers of my blog, I guess. And then the 4th section will be to share some recommendation for bulbs. And I also have some images that I would like to include. So I went ahead and found the links for this. Now, by found, I mean, these are images that are on my Google Drive. And so I've got links that will link to them on my Google Drive, but they could be from anywhere, right? I also here mentioned that I've got a general image that I want to use, and I'm actually including it as part of my project as a local file. So I've got an images folder over here, and I've got this blossoms image that we're going to use as a background. Actually, no, not as a background. Today, we're going to use it just on the page. We won't use it as a background until we learn CSS. Okay, but you see the point, right? Like I went ahead and did a bunch of planning. I thought through kind of generally speaking how I want my information to flow and what kind of things I need. So once you have that, you can kind of get started. So I've got everything sectioned off, and I've got my title up in the head for the tab. And then, and also, I mean, if you were, when you go through a search engine and it shows you the title of the page, this is generally where it's coming from. So let's just put some text right here at the top of the body just to prove that things will show up on the page. And I'll just put, this is some text, and this will be temporary. And by the way, these comments, you can do them with Command/. to comment in and out, just like you would with JavaScript. And it shows you it's got this, it looks like an element, but it's got an exclamation point, dash, dash at the beginning, and then dash, dash at the end, and you just put your text in between. So I could actually put that after my text right here, and just say temporary, and that's going to, yeah, and VS Code is highlighting that for me. That's another extension I've got, a little highlight, to-do highlight. Okay, so let's just see if we can get this on the page, right? And actually get this in the browser. So again, I could certainly just open this in a browser if I wanted to go to the entire like file path and all of that. But I like to use live server. So I've got that installed. I'm going to say open with live server. And you can see down here, it's showing that it's opening it on port 5500. And it did open it, but it opened it on a different monitor. So let me move it over. Here we go. And I'm going to actually just put it right here in this browser. And you can see that right here up on the tab, it says the green thumb Ivana Grow stuff. And then it says this is some text in the actual body. Okay, so we are good to go. We've got a page that's actually going to work for us here. We just need to start adding content. And to do that, we're going to need to add some, we're going to need to talk about some additional elements that you need to learn. Okay, so if you want to generally structure your text, you can actually, what we've structured sections now. What if you wanted to structure actual text like, lines of text and paragraphs? You can use H1 all the way to H6. So 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for headings. And that will automatically give you like bigger, bolder text on different levels. And the browser will go ahead and handle that for you without you having to specify the size and the line weight. So we can do that. We can use P to form a paragraph, which it has some structural implications in that it adds a little bit of space after each paragraph automatically. Whereas BR with a slash, and notice this one does not have an opening and closing tag. It's called a self-closing tag, where it has the slash at the end of the same tag. That's a line break. So that'll just force something to push to the next line, but it doesn't add any extra space like a paragraph would. And sometimes you want one and sometimes you want the other. Now, these days, because of CSS, it's not as common to see line breaks because you just use CSS to control your spacing. But we'll use it today just to show you the difference. And sometimes you still will see it. It just every once in a while, it's just a handy way to force something to the next line. Okay, so that's how you structure your text. Let's just do a couple of things for this. And I'm going to move back over here to my live server window so that you can see things updating as we type them. And do remember that in VS Code, I have it set way up here somewhere to autosave. Yes, I have autosave on, which means I'm not constantly saving my file after I make changes. So literally as I'm typing, it's going to be, continually updating. Okay, so we have to-do number 4 here is going to be to add an H1 and an H3 to our header. Okay, so inside the header, I will add an H1, that's the biggest one, and it's going to say the green thumb as the title of my blog. And then after that, I'll add an H3 to have a smaller heading that says a daily blog by Ivana Grow Stuff. Okay. And as soon as I kind of stop typing and pause for a second, you see that it updates. So now we have our heading and our subheading here in all of its 1995 glory with Times New Roman. So today everything is going to look like, actually, we're going to talk about tables in a bit, and that's more like 1997 because tables weren't around in 95. But it's going to look real 90s anyway up here today until we get to CSS. Okay, so that will take care of that. And we can also add a little HR here to put a line across this to kind of show, hey, there's our header. And now below here, we're going to have the main content. And notice HR is also a self-closing tag, right? Okay, So that gets us started. What if we wanted to go ahead and put some titles in our other sections? So we have our article. We would like to just maybe put a date inside this article before we start putting things in our sections. So I can do that. I can just do a little paragraph and say October, actually, well, yeah. I'm going to go off of my example so it's consistent. October 20th, 2022. Okay. And let's say in our sections, now we have our first section. We're going to put H3, and this is our making progress section. Remember, I said the first thing I wanted to do was report on today's activities. So we'll do that here. And then I'll talk about what I completed and all of that. So maybe down here, I'll say H4, I'll do a slightly smaller one that's like completed today. And so I'll have that little heading. And that'll be it. We'll put some paragraphs and things in there in a minute. And then my next section, I want to have my plans. So I'm going to put another H3 and be consistent with the first heading that I had in this section. I'm going to make H3s for all of these. My plans for the new flower bed. And then we'll have a place in here to put tomorrow's tasks. So I'm going to put that with an H4. And we'll leave some room there to put some things below that. And then in this third section, we're going to make this one about our plant requirements. So I'll put an H3 here with plant requirements. And we'll get to the content of that later as well. Then in the fourth section, I'm just going to say recommendations. That's the main thing about this one. So, okay. And as I have been typing, you've been seeing all of these things show up here on the page. So I'm starting to narrow into, how I'm structuring my page with different sections, and, I've got my headings in place. So now I'm just going to need to, do a few more things here to start putting some paragraphs and things in. But before I add more content, I want to talk about how you could actually style your text if you were using some of the built-in tags for HTML. There are a limited number of things that you can do. And ideally, you actually are going to do very little of this with HTML. You're mostly going to use CSS for your styling. But you're going to see these are pretty common basic HTML things. So I want to make sure to cover them. B can be used to bold text. EM for emphasis, the browser will default to making this italics. And then small will default to making the text like slightly smaller. I'm not sure if it's like 0.9 of the original height or what it is, but it makes tiny text. And so I've got some examples here on the page where, you can see I've got my header, I've got some paragraphs, and then right here, I've got some bold text, and I wrap that in a B, and here I've got some italicized text wrapped in EM. And then I have some small text down here in my footer. We're going to do something like this in ours as well. And span is something that will wrap around text, but it doesn't force like a paragraph break or anything like that, or even a line break. It's just a wrapper for the purposes of doing something different to that text that isn't done to the rest of the text in the sentence. Styling is a common thing to do inline styling for something or apply a class. That's something we're going to learn about with CSS next time. So you don't need to worry about this syntax today, but I wanted to just do it just enough for you to see why a span might be used. So I have this sentence. In this paragraph, I have some special text, and I want to apply something just to that text. So I use a span just to wrap around it, but it still stays in line with everything else. And so I just changed the color to salmon and change the text to uppercase. And that's inline CSS. Again, don't worry about that until next time. But that's how a span works. It just wraps around the text, but it doesn't change the flow of the text or the structure of it. Okay. The last thing on here is a little bit of a bonus for you. It's not in the book, but they want you to do it in graded assignment 4. So this is called an HTML entity. When you see something that starts with an ampersand and ends with a semicolon, and in between it's just a little code that refers to a symbol. And there are lots and lots and lots of them out there. You can look that up online at lists of HTML entities. You can look at some charts that show you what they are and what their codes are. A very common one is copyright. So you just do and copy with a semicolon on the end. And that will put the little copyright symbol on your page. When you do graded assignment 4, they're going to want you to be a little more creative than that and use something different. So let's go add some more stuff to our page. We can, put some paragraphs in our first section here and maybe emphasize some of the text or make it bold. So in my making progress, I'm going to write a sentence here as a paragraph and say, today I emphasis, finally, and then I'll move past the closing tag of emphasis and put a space. Got the new flower bed ready for planting. Okay, and that's the end of my paragraph. Let's go over and make sure we've got our preview here. So today I finally got the new flower bed ready for planting. All right, and you can see that finally is in italics, right? So that would be all I really wanted to say there. And then in completed today, I'm going to make a list. I haven't told you how to do that yet, so we'll skip that. But let's come down here for my plans for the new flower bed. No. I'm sorry. Still in the same section, I would like to add another paragraph. Yep, before we move to the other section. And I'm gonna open it up like this so that I can put it on several lines, but it's still gonna be considered part of the same paragraph. And the way that I'm going to control the line breaks, I can just start typing this in and say, can I just take a moment to say, remember, this is a blog with personality, right? Okay. And I could say I, and then maybe on the next one, say am, so tired, period. Okay. If anyone has ever done a hard day's work in the garden, they know what I'm talking about, right? Right now, it's just showing up as a sentence. That's because I just have a paragraph. If I wanted to force these on each line, I'm going to need to put in that line break, right? So I'll add a line break to each one of these. And as I do, you see over in the browser, it's moving them all onto individual lines. Okay. And I really meant for this to be lowercase. That's cool. Okay. Let's say that I wanted to make some of this bold. I can do that. So I'll just put my first so here in bold. And when you type this in, this is going to be something that you just kind of have to get used to. If you do this after the fact and you're typing it in, VS Code is being super helpful, it thinks. And so it gives you the closing tag, but then if you do it like this after the fact, it's before the text. So then you have to like cut it and paste it after the text you want bolded and all of that. You can get around that by just doing it as you're going. So I could have just done B and then said so. And then just, move your cursor after that and keep going. So you'll have to kind of just get into the flow of that. But I'm going to do it again here. And so I'll move this. I'll just cut it and move it. Okay. But I also want to apply a little bit of inline styling with this. So I'm going to use a span. And again, I'm just gonna type it in and remove it here. This is easier. Okay. I'm going to put a span around this so that I can add one more thing. And I'm going to change the style to font size 1.2 REM. I'll teach you guys about what this stuff means in the next lecture, but don't worry about it for today. But you can see that it made it a little bigger, right? It's now 120% of the size of the rest of the text by making it 1.2 REM. Okay. And then I could have like one more little paragraph that I can put here. I'll just paste it in. I'm not going to type by hand all of this. Okay. And we see gardening can be a lot of work, but with a hot shower and a little rest for my sore muscles, I'll be ready to add plants and mulch tomorrow. Okay. So that ends the first section. So, and leads right into the next section where she's going to talk about her plans for the new flower bed. And no, this is my plans for the new, yeah, sorry, there's going to be another section here I forgot about. Did I mess this up? Hold on. Oh, I did. Guys, I'm not paying attention. I put these in the wrong section. These were supposed to be up here. Okay. Yeah, that's better. I want my plans for the new flower bed to be after this. Okay. So, good. So we kind of got some stuff in there. Let's go talk about some more elements that we can learn, and then we're going to start to fill this out a little more. You can create lists with HTML. OL will give you an ordered list, so it'll be numbered 1, 2, 3. And UL will give you an unordered list, which just means bullet points. So you can see here in my example, I've got an ordered list here and an unordered list down here, and so you can see the difference. In order to apply those numbers or bullets to each individual item in the list, you use LI for list item, and you just put a whole bunch of those in between the OL or the UL tags, and it lists them one by one. Okay. So let's take a look at how we can do this. Right up here in our very first section, we're going to say that we've completed some things, and I'm going to make this an unordered list, so just bullet points. And I'll say LI, I weeded the existing soil. And then I'll do another one and say I set some retaining wall stones. And then my third one that I did was I added topsoil 6 inches below the wall height and mixed with existing soil. Okay, so lots of preparation for this bed. Then I can talk down here about my plans for the new flower bed. And I'm going to put a little paragraph in. I'll copy that over. This says, since it's autumn, I'm going to be focusing on planting crocus, hyacinth, daffodil, and tulip bulbs for spring blooming. And in the spring, I will plant some lilies for summer blooming. So then I have tomorrow's tasks. I'm going to make an ordered list this time, so it's, numbered. And so I'll have like LI, and let me get this up so we can see what we're adding. Yep, there we go. LI, and I'll put, lay out hyacinth in clusters of 3. And, I could keep going with everything that I want to do. So I'll have a whole bunch more here that I'll paste in. Okay, lay out crocuses in clusters of 6, and then, tulips, daffodils, add the topsoil, cover entire flower bed with 3 inches of mulch, water thoroughly without disturbing mulch. Okay, so I have lined out exactly what I need to do the next day to finish planting this bed. So we're doing good. We're starting to, really organize all of our information well, and even, make it stand out with some of these headings, and it can visually see things in different sections a little more easily. So who has questions about what I've done so far? Well, we're going to take a break, and then when we come back, I will do a little more.
I don't see any questions.
Okay, yeah. This stuff's mostly straightforward, and you can, practice, and you'll get real accustomed to it pretty quickly. So we'll take a 5-minute break, and then when we come back, we'll continue learning a few more tags and a couple more things. Okay, welcome back, everyone. And one more thing I'm going to show you before we move on to talking about tables. Down here in the footer, we can actually go ahead and add this content based on what we already learned. So I'm going to put another HR, one of those little hard rule lines. So it actually shows where the footer is. And then I'm going to just put a simple paragraph and add small text. So I'm going to use this small tags and just use an an HTML entity, I'm going to use that copyright entity if I can find the right key. There we go. So I'll say ampersand copy semicolon, and that creates the copyright symbol. And then I'll say 2022 Ivana Grosov. Okay. And then we see that down here, and it doesn't really look super small, but there it is.
I don't think it's inside the small tag.
Because it's not inside the small tags. Thank you. Wow, I'm not firing on all cylinders today, guys, apparently. Whoo, there we go. It definitely looks smaller now because I actually put it where I was supposed to put it. Okay, yeah, thanks for that. Good catch. Okay, so there we go. Paragraph, small, and then we have the HTML entity and our text. Okay. So let's go to our next slide and learn about tables. So for tables, you start out with, not surprisingly, a table tag, and the entire thing should go inside that. You can use TR to indicate rows and TH for the cells that are in the header row, and TD for cells inside the regular rows. And so it's going to format the header row a little bit differently, like it automatically makes it bold, for example. And you just need to make sure that you keep the number and the order, like the sequence of these, consistent as you're defining each row so that they line up the way you expect them to. There's also some other tags you can use like T-head, T-body, T-foot if you want to group together your header row and all the stuff in the center and maybe some sort of footer row. And here I've just kept it simple. I just have the table. I have 4 rows, right? My header row with the THs, my regular rows with TDs, 1, 2, and 3. And you can see how those come out here. XOX is XOX. This one is XOO, and we see it here in the third column or third row rather. And then here we have OXO. So you just kind of have to wrap your head around the idea that you're writing everything in a vertical sequence, but when you use the THs and the TDs, you're actually working from left to right across the columns. That's the idea here. Okay, so let's do this. Oh yeah, I did have one more little thing on here. Yeah, you can see now how important it is to indent your tags. Reading this without indenting would be a little bit of a nightmare, right? So let's go and do a table in our plant requirements section. And right under here, I'll get our page back so we can see it come out here. I'm going to go ahead and start by just doing the table itself. And I can add, I'm going to go ahead and show you what it is to use these section ones, T-head, and I'll do a T-body, and we're going to break these out just a little bit. And I'm not going to use the footer ones. We'll just do the header and the body. Okay, I would like to have 4 rows, 1 for each of the types of flowers that I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to have TR, and then I'll do 3 more after that. But while I'm at it, I'm going to open this up like this so that I can very clearly put each of my columns in place. So I'll have a TH for each of these. And I can put type. And actually, you know what? I'm just going to copy this down. Oh, but there's one more thing I want to do. You can actually put in certain attributes on things like this. Like if I want to control the width of these, I can actually say I want these widths to be 80 pixels wide, for example. So attributes can be a helpful thing on some of these tags. In fact, for that matter, I'm also going to add a little styling up here just to align all of the text in the table to center. So we'll get more into the styling again next lecture with CSS, but I can do just a little bit now in our HTML just to make it look a certain way. Okay, I'm going to copy this down and have 5 columns for now. We'll have type, quantity, cluster, question mark, whether we should cluster or not, what the spacing is, and what the depth should be. Okay. So those are my TH because those are my header row. And you can see that it's put them in place. It's got them relatively centered for each of their, columns. And no, they are centered. Yeah, because they're exactly 80 pixels wide, right? So everything's nicely kind of spaced out here. Now we just need to do our regular rows. So down here in the T body, I'm going to say TR, and then I'll do TD with each one having the information. So the first one is going to be crocuses. And then I'll do another TD for the second column for the quantity and say I have 60 of those. Or should they be clustered? I'll say yes. And they need to be spaced. Those clusters need to be spaced about 1 foot apart. And then I want to plant them about 2 inches deep. Okay, so we have our first row over here. Crocuses, 60, yes, 1 foot, 2 inches. So I can add information for the other 3 here, which I will just paste in real quick, rather than typing them in painstakingly for you. Looks like I failed to do the row part, so let me fix that. Oh, I see. Yeah, I'm gonna need to. All right, I'll move this up. That's what I get for trying to save time. I'm actually taking more time now. Okay. There's a reason I'm not just copying this all at once. We'll get there in a minute. Okay. We're going to add one more column in a minute. But for now, I just want to do these 5 columns. Okay, the last one will be my tulips. Okay, so now we see all 4 of them: crocuses, hyacinths, daffodils, tulips, with all of their information. And it's very easy to read this because the table organizes it for us. Okay, that'll be it for now. We'll come back and add another column in a minute. Let's talk about images. So you can use an image tag, IMG, for images. It is a self-closing tag, so make sure you put that slash in there at the end. And then you need to add some attributes. The source attribute will set the file path or name, and name, I should say. And then the size can be set with the width or height attributes. And so in this example, I've got the LaunchCode logo and I've set it at 300 pixels wide. And yes, that's it. So let's go do this. I'm having a heck of a time. All right. There's 2 things I wanted to do, and one is to put an image right here above the article. So we'll do this. And this is the one that I actually have in this folder over here. So I'm going to use a file path that just goes and gets it from my structure right here, adjacent to my HTML file. So I'll add an image and say that the source is, and I need to go to /images/blossoms.jpg. VS Code is helping me, and I'm just tabbing over. Okay. And then I want to say that the width is going to be 400 pixels. And I'm going to give it a style called a style where it floats to the right of my stuff. And then I need to close it. So slash, and then I'll close out the tag. Okay. And I'm putting this above the article so that it'll float right here at the very top. And if I had my thing in like this, it would look a little, it would look like it makes more sense. But that's okay. We'll keep this for now because my slides need to be wide. All right, so let's come down to here, to the table. What I would like to do is have it so that in our table, we have a little tiny image for each one. And I planned for this because I went and got the links for each of the images for each of the flowers that I need, right? So I can copy these and like copy this one right here, for example. and we'll come back over to our HTML. And in order to facilitate this, I need to add one more column. So I'm going to start with my header section and just put in another TH with a width of 80 pixels. And I'm going to say image. And then down below, something's not quite right. TH width equals, oh, I forgot my closing quote. Okay. So that's a good example of how VS Code kind of helps you out by coloring things differently. So you could see it was coloring all of this as green because until it got to the next quote, it didn't know that I had ended it. So I have to actually put the quote here and now it looks right. Okay. So we'll add this column and now everything is off by a column until I add the corresponding TDs in each of these. So I'll do that. I'll say, here's a TD for this one. And I'm going to put an image right in here, give it a source that has my URL. And I'll say the width needs to be 50 pixels. Good heavens. Okay, there we go. And then I'll close out the image tag with the slash. Okay, and we see our image appear with the little crocuses right where it's supposed to be. So now we need to do the same thing to add one more cell in the front of each of these rows so that it'll be in the column and everything will line up correctly. So I'm going to copy these over real quick. And we want this to be first. Do my daffodils. And then I'll do the tulips. Oops, I did that in the wrong order. Let me push that up. Okay, and those are not working. Oh, I know why. I know why. I forgot to update. Yeah, Google Drive changed the way that you go get images. It used to be this UC question mark export equals view. And now you have to say thumbnail and tell it what size. So all I have to do is change out this part. I forgot to refresh my solution that I updated. But it is correct on if you go look at it on my repo. Okay, there we go. Now we have the correct links for our pictures. Okay. So different ways to add images, right? You can place one on the page anywhere you want. And in this case, I put them right there in my table. Okay, hyperlink. This is another thing. If you want to be able to have links on your page, you need an A tag for anchoring your hyperlink to some sort of text or picture or whatever. Then you give it the href attribute, and that sets the destination URL. And it might also be a path name to your own site. In this case, we have where I've got, a link to LaunchCode's website, launchcode.org. And you'll notice this other little thing here, target equals underscore blank. This has been around pretty much since the beginning. And it makes sure that the link opens in a new tab if someone clicks on it, which is very desirable if you have a business and you're pointing to someone else's site, because you would like people to still stay on your site, at least in one tab, right? So you can force it to open in another tab by doing this target equals underscore blank. So we're going to do that right here in our recommendations section. I think that this is outside where I want it to be. Let's put it there. Yeah, it's easy to get things out of order. So I'm going to have a little paragraph here and just say, I got my bulbs from, and then I'm going to do an anchor with an href attribute and say https://rex.com, which is one of many sites where you can buy these kinds of bulbs. Order them ahead of time and get cool stuff that you can't find at your local Home Depot. Okay, and I'll say Brex between the A tags, the opening and closing A tags, and that makes sure that whatever text is here is what actually displays on the page. There we go. I had to refresh it for some reason, but there we go. That's the link that displays on the page. And if I click on it, it actually takes me to the website in another, with all of their little pop-ups, in another tab. And I still have my original page over here in this tab. So that's why I like to use that target equals underscore blank. Okay. And then I can just maybe add a little more text like, they have a great selection. And you can see that it's just, the link is just right there in the middle of the sentence, no problem. Okay. I actually think there's a, I could show you another example here of using another HTML entity. If I replace this double dash here, I could say, and M dash, I think. Yeah, and it gives me a nice M dash right there without having to do double hyphens. Okay. So let's see if there's anything else that I wanted to add here. I think we've pretty much covered everything. But yeah, this is it. Okay, so one more thing I want to do before we leave this is to talk about the browser developer tools. This is very important, actually. If you want to look at your source code and actually interact with your page for development purposes, both Firefox and Chrome and other things, but these tend to be favorites with developers. They have really great dev tools. They let you examine your code in relation to the content on the page right there. And you can use this thing called an element inspector to look at a single element at a time and get information. So I'm going to demonstrate this for you. Let's come back over here. And there's a couple different ways to get to it. You can come up to view. This is Chrome, by the way, but it'll be something very similar for Firefox, and you're actually going to use Firefox for your studio. And so you'll get to practice with Firefox, but I'll show you Chrome for now. I'm going to go to developer and go to the JavaScript console. No, I want to just go, I mean, these will all open the dev panel, but I'm going to go to developer tools and just, it will default to open to whatever you had last. But if you haven't opened it on this page before, you'll just see elements, the very first one. And that's the one we want to focus on because for today, we're only looking at the HTML. However, down here, you can see that they've got some CSS and you could switch tabs and see a JavaScript console and go to, network information. We're going to look at all of these kind of a lecture at a time as we unfold things where we teach you CSS and how to add JavaScript and how to request data from like another website. We'll see all of these things eventually. For now, let's just take a look at this. You'll notice as I am scrolling over my text here in this right panel, it's highlighting it on the page. Right now, I'm highlighting the main section, so it's showing you the entire main section. But if I expand this, because it was collapsed, I can start to see things that were nested inside. So I have my image and it's highlighted, right? Then I have the article and I can go in and look at individual stuff within the article. There's that whole section. If I expand the section, we can see the individual H3, the H4, the paragraph. I can even bring this down and take a look at where that EM tag is applied to the word finally, and you can see it highlighted on the page. You also see that it's showing you a little pop-up there on the page. It's going to be difficult for you to read it because it's so small, I realize that. And it's telling you a little bit of information about it, like its size, for example. But if you really want to look at things and you actually want to find what you're looking for on the page, so let's say all of this stuff is, back to being collapsed like this, right? This inspector tool right here at the top left, if I click on this and it kind of turns a blue color, and it'll do the same thing in Firefox. Now, when I come over here, I highlight these and it lets me highlight them individually. And I can click on any one of these to jump to it. And notice how it's expanding and collapsing things over in the HTML as I do this. This is the best way to find what you're looking for is to actually use this tool up here in the top left corner. And then you can isolate this so that you don't have to dig for it. So I can go all the way down into this table and get to exactly the TD that I'm looking for here. And if I click on it, it holds it. And then I can move my mouse off and that tool is no longer activated. I can move around like normal and I can come over here and look at things. Okay. So as soon as I want to find something else, I turn it back on, and now it's highlighting things on the page for me again. I click on it, it shows me where it is, and now I have my regular cursor back. So this is an extremely valuable way to be able to interact with the HTML and double check that things are the way that you think they are. So some of the mistakes that I made where I had things not nested properly, this tool would have helped me figure it out pretty quickly. But some of you are eagle-eyed and you had already seen it. So good for you. Okay. Yeah, I appreciate it actually. I want you to make sure that I fix my mistakes so that I'm not confusing you as much as possible. Okay, so that's that tool. And you can have some fun playing around with that. You're actually going to do something interesting for your studio today where you come in here and edit things. So like I could edit the date and change it to, 2023 if I wanted to, and hit enter. And you'll notice on the page, it says 2023 right now. I did not change my file back here, the source where it's coming from that I developed. I'm just changing the browser's copy temporarily. And as soon as I were to refresh the page up here, notice it changes back to 2022 because it's using the source code again. So that's what you're going to mess with today. You're going to have some fun changing things on somebody else's website. And it'll be a fun little exercise. Anybody have any questions about some of the things I just did?
I don't think so.
Okay. I have some very basic practice on HTML, little exercise called Hello World, courtesy of my instructor, a guy named Will, who had stolen it from someone else. But you could do that if you would like yeah, so you can go and find that right here if you search for HTML exercises. I have a couple more here that are shown in the image, but those include CSS as well. So you might want to wait until after the next lecture to dive into these. Okay. When you're ready to prepare for graded assignment 4, I have a couple of tutorials for that as well. I've got the As Easy as Apple Pie one that really just shows you a top to bottom, and it really is just the requirements for what you need for your graded assignment. But of course, I styled it pretty nicely. But it's not too complex. If you're ready to dig into something a little bit more complex, Small Business Savvy actually gets into a little bit of Flexbox for your layout and things like that. So depending on whether you already have experience with this or not, you might want to do one of these or the other one, just for practice. All right, so tomorrow is graded assignment workday and also self-assessment exam number 2. On Monday, we talk about CSS and a little bit more about Git, and you'll get to practice collaborating in Git for your studio. We'll talk about the DOM and events, how to use JavaScript to make your page interactive beyond what the browser is capable of, like the links that we put in today. And then you'll have a graded assignment workday on Wednesday. We're going to introduce graded assignment 4 this day, but it's also the day that graded assignment 3 is due, and we understand that most of you are still going to be working on graded assignment 3 this day, so it's no problem. We're just going to go ahead and get this one introduced because at that point, you'll have already learned everything you need for it, just HTML and CSS, and it's a very easy assignment. So you'll go ahead and take care of that on Wednesday. For Studio today, you're going to do the making headlines. So yeah, you're going to use Firefox. And if you haven't downloaded it, you can do that very easily. And then use the developer tools to edit any website you want. You're going to have fun, change text, photos, and just, they remind you in the instructions to be respectful. Like, don't do anything inflammatory or controversial. This is not the place to have larger arguments about politics or whatever. Yeah. Okay. So I have a bullet point for that. Good. Keep it respectful. That's right. Just have fun with it. And be very careful, because if you navigate away from the page accidentally because you click on something without having that inspector tool activated, you're going to have to start over. So just be careful with that. All right. Then take a screenshot and share it with everybody in the Making Headlines channel in Discord, which I have already created. You may have noticed it. That's where you want to post your screenshot once you're done, because of course, as soon as you close it, it's all gone, or refresh the page or whatever. So this will be your way of holding on to the page that you made. And we, as a staff, always really look forward to seeing these because you guys are hilarious and it's fun. Okay. So I can show you what I came up with for the studio review. I just went to the New York Times Science Space and Astronomy page and turned it into Space and Astronomy Muse and said NASA sends its first catanaut to space. Marta, a highly intelligent feline catanaut, was chosen for this groundbreaking mission to search for new worlds on which to knock things over and sit in boxes, because those are priorities, right? And I just, edited a few things on the page, threw a different image source in there and styled it a little bit with a border around it and changed the color of this. So you can mess around with all of that and have some fun.